Chapter 11 of Tractate Zevachim continues going through the various laws of temple offerings, now on principles of cleaning garments and vessels. The first Mishnah says, if blood from a chatas offering got splattered on a garment, the garment must be laundered. This would apply by every type of chatas offering, unless the chatas offering was invalid, even if it was valid for a brief period. An example of a chatas that was valid for only a brief period would be one that was left overnight, or it became impure, or it left the courtyard. It would be entirely always invalid if it was slaughtered with improper intent of time or location, or if disqualified people received or threw the blood. The Gemara clarifies, this applies to all chatas offerings, that their blood must be laundered out of garments. It said this would not apply to the bird chatas offering, and it quotes sources. This is discussed. Anyways, it asks what the law is by a bird chatas offering brought inside the temple sanctuary, but before its blood was sprinkled, as to whether that's invalid, based on whether the neck is compared to a service vessel, which would be invalid in such a situation, or that it's compared to the neck of an animal chatas, which would be fine. It's debated from some cases and is unresolved. Similarly, if bird chatas blood spilled onto the floor and was then collected in a vessel, it's argued if this is valid based on whether a service vessel is just not required for that or that it's actually prohibited. Again, it's a disputed point. Further, if the blood of an animal chatas gets splattered on a garment and then it goes from the garment to a second garment, it's argued if that second garment requires laundering. Some hold that simply yes, as this blood was valid for a period, so it must be laundered anyways. Additionally, if chatas blood splattered a garment which was impure, thereby making the blood impure, based on whether the blood's invalidation needs to be at a different time from when it contacts the garment, or perhaps you could say that they even can occur simultaneously. This principle is a disputed one based on some laws of impurity regarding a case of sprinkling impure purification waters on a woman with nida impurity. Anyways, we said invalid chatas offering blood in a garment doesn't require laundering. There's a dispute if this applies to an offering that was never valid or even to one that was valid for a period, and sources are quoted. New Mishnah. If blood of a chatas offering went straight from the animal's neck onto the garment, there's no need to launder it. If it splattered the garment from the horn or base of the altar, there's no need for laundry. If the blood spilled onto the floor and was gathered up, the garment doesn't require laundering. Essentially, the only way the garment would require laundering is if the blood in question was received in a vessel and is fit for sprinkling on the altar. The Gemara quotes sources. It also explains the ending statement of the Mishnah that blood requires laundering if it was received in a service vessel and is otherwise valid, is essentially explaining the reason the prior listed cases don't apply. When it said the blood needs to be fit for sprinkling, that was to exclude a case where he received less than the minimum amount for sprinkling in two separate vessels. The fact that this is invalid is sourced. New Mishnah. If chatas blood splattered on an animal's hide, if the hide wasn't yet stripped from the animal, it doesn't require laundering. If the hide had been stripped, it's a debate. Additionally, by these principles of laundering garments, only the actual spot with blood needs washing, not the full garment. Also, it only applies to something that's susceptible to impurity, and something fit to be laundered, including cloth garments, sackcloth, and hide. The laundering must be done in the temple courtyard. Also, when meat of an offering is cooked in an earthenware vessel, the vessel must be broken in the temple courtyard, and if a copper vessel is used, it must be purged and rinsed in the temple courtyard. Additionally, this principle by a chatas, that its blood must be washed out of garments, is a stringency that applies to the chatas specifically over other kache kachim type offerings. The Gemara quotes sources for these principles. These are additionally discussed. Also, when it said that something that can be laundered applies by these laws, that's to exclude something like vessels. We give examples of cloth garments, sackcloth, and hide. There's a dispute if leather would apply. Some say everybody agrees soft leathers are launderable, while hard leathers are disputed. That's discussed. There's a dispute on this based on what exactly the parameters of laundering are defined as. It also sources the principle that laundering these garments and the cleaning of vessels for offerings were all done within the actual temple courtyard. New Mishnah. If a garment that was stained with chatas blood went outside the temple courtyard, it should be brought back inside and laundered. If it became impure while outside, it should be torn to remove its impurity status, and then brought back inside and laundered. If an earthenware vessel that was used to cook a chatas offering went outside the temple courtyard, it should be brought back inside and broken. If it became impure while outside, it should be punctured to remove its impurity status, and brought back inside and broken. If a copper vessel that was used to cook a chatas offering went outside the temple courtyard, it should be brought back inside and purged and rinsed. If it became impure while outside, it should have a large hole knocked out to remove its impurity status and brought back inside and purged and rinsed. The Gemara clarifies, when the garment is being torn, it doesn't mean in two. It means across majority of its length or width, so that way it's still valid to be laundered. This is sufficient biblically. When the earthenware vessel is being punctured, that's referring to a hole the size of a small root, so that way it could still be broken as an actual vessel. When we said the copper utensil needs a hole knocked inside, it then has that hole hammered shut, so that way it's valid to be rinsed and purged afterwards. If the garment in question is the robe of the Kohen Gadol, which cannot be ripped, it should be brought into the courtyard 3 finger breadths at a time, and it should be laundered as it goes in. Additionally, it's asked, as urine was one of the types of detergent detergent used back in those days. How could that be used within the temple courtyard? So it's explained that the urine in this case was mixed with tasteless saliva, as was each type of detergent. New Mishnah. Regarding the cooking of offerings, whether it was cooked in a pot or if it had just had hot liquid poured over it, whether it was kache kachim or kache kalim type offerings, the pots used must be purged and then rinsed. Others hold the pots used to cook kache kalim don't need purging and rinsing. The Gemara quotes sources. It's asked, what if the chatas was suspended in an oven without touching the walls? Is just absorption considered a concern? It argues this from a number of brought cases discussing a number of unique types of ovens. These are spoken on further. Specific incidents involving purging and cleaning these utensils are quoted. Sources are brought for the remaining points. It's said that teruma in a pot does not require purging or rinsing in spite of the flavor absorption. It's clarified that the entire pot doesn't need purging, but the actual place of cooking does. Others say that it actually all must be purged, but you can even use wine or diluted wine. Others say it's just that purging can even be done with hot water alone, with no additional cold rinsing needed. New Mishnah, Rabbi Tarfon says, if somebody cooked meat of an offering in a vessel at the beginning of a holiday, he can continue cooking it across the entire holiday. The sages say that until the time of eating is the requirement for purging and rinsing, which will be explained. Purging and rinsing must be done the same way that cup by blessings after meals are prepared, that it should be washed on the inside and outside here, both with cold water. A spit or a grill are purged with hot water. The Gemara quotes sources for the opinions of Rabbi Tarfon and the sages. There's a dispute as to how purging and rinsing are done. Some say both are done with cold water after a hot water purging. Some say purging is done with hot water and rinsing is done with cold water. They debate sources. New Mishnah. If somebody cooks sacrificial meats and regular meats together in a pot, or kache kachim meats were cooked with kache kalim meats, if there's enough that the more stringent type of meat will impart flavor to the other, then the other more lenient type of meat must be eaten in the same manner as the stricter piece, and the pot doesn't require purging and rinsing, and other foods aren't disqualified through their contact. If a disqualified mincha wafer offering touched a regular qualified mincha wafer, or a slice of disqualified sacrificial meat touched a proper slice of qualified meat, neither would be entirely disqualified. The only forbidden place is the place of contact and absorption. The Gemara clarifies in the first case, if the two meats touch each other, if there's enough to transfer flavors, the lenient meat is eaten like the stringent one is, the pots require purging and rinsing, and they disqualify other foods through contact. If there's not enough to transfer flavor, none of these apply. Some clarify that the pot with kache kalim would require purging and rinsing. It's just not required by kache kachim. Others say it's just not required by kache kalim. That's qualified. It also quotes related conversation on the two types of wafer offerings coming in contact. Anyway, it's clearly the positive commandment to eat offering meat is not overriding the negative commandment to not eat disqualified meats. There are a few suggested reasons why. Some say that a positive commandment does not override a negative commandment by the temple. Others say that it says positive commandments can't override a combination of a positive and negative commandment. It's discussed. Sources are quoted along with related points. Anyways, it's said, if blood of a chatas and an ola splatter on a garment, if the chatas blood is on bottom, the garment must be laundered. But if the ola blood is on bottom, it said laundering is not required here. It's also said if there's blood on a garment, it will create an interposition if placed in a mikvah. Well, this would not apply if the garment owner was a slaughterer, as presumably he's fine with the blood. Similarly, if there's grease on a garment, it will create an interposition if placed in a mikvah, while this would not apply if the garment owner sold grease by the same principle. Now, if there's blood and grease on a garment and the garment owner is a slaughterer and he sells grease, is a debate as to if he'll take issue with both of these substances, and that stands unresolved. And that's the end of chapter 11.